Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We're continuing again on our pandemic projects. We previewed this one a couple of days ago. It's actually a new reel, but I'm going to take it apart and show you how to service it in case you have one of these. And in case you're considering buying one of these, we'll show you a little bit about it. This is the Shakespeare reel. It's the Shakespeare Cirrus. The Cirrus itself has been around a long time. It's come in a couple of different versions. It's kind of an entry-level reel, one ball bearing. And it's a 30 size, which makes it good for rivers and ponds and lake fishing and the like. And you really don't need that many more ball bearings than the one that it has. Ideally, you would have 3. Folks ask me that all the time. One on each side of the main gear and one up top is kind of ideal. Anything more than that starts to be frills, and anything less than that, well, in the case of a 30 size reel intended for freshwater, it's not that big a deal. Out in the inshore ocean, you would probably want the ball bearings there for just because of the size of fish and the fight that you're going to get behind them. But let's take this apart. Let's show you how it's made, show you how to service it, and if you have one of these, you'll do your annual tune-up on it, and you should be fine. And what I'm going to do here applies to almost all of these Cirrus, regardless of age, whether it's new or not. So we have a spool. The spool's got some top drag washers in. We'll come back to that in a moment. You'll notice as I take the pieces and parts off that I'm putting them in a parts tray. And my parts tray is nothing more than a bottom of a milk jug. You can use commercially made ones. You can use any kind of container you got, but I do recommend using a parts tray. This has a handle that goes straight through the main gear. It's held on by a handle screw. And when I take that off, I generally like to put it right back into the handle so that I know where to find it later. And then we'll put the handle into the parts tray. To get the side plate off on this one, you want to look. If you see that the side plate is got a straight line across it, then you know you can take it off without removing the rotor. In this case, it doesn't. That piece goes up into the rotor. So you want to remove the click ratchet and the little spool shim. You can do that by pulling off. Sometimes it's easier than not. In that case, it was fairly easy. And then you want to take the set screw that's holding down the rotor nut. I take that set screw out so we can remove the rotor nut. Put that in there, remembering that it's a flathead screw. And it's a good time to tell you a couple of things. As a precaution, I use a latex glove. Some folks were asking me, gee, you're working on a new reel, what would you expect? Why would you bother to do that? Well, I've been working on more than just this reel today, and from time to time it gets dirty in there. Okay, so I have a 10mm wrench. I was just going this way and notice it tightened it rather than loosened it. So this is a reverse threaded nut, and you want to take that off by turning it clockwise, which is your traditional way of tightening a nut. You'll notice that there's 2 sides on this nut. One has kind of got a bevel and a raised lip, and that's the side that was facing down. So we're going to make sure that we put it down on the way back. Now we should be able to remove the rotor. This has a relatively simple, old school sawtooth anti-reverse. So the sawteeth are in the bottom of the rotor. This is your anti-reverse dog, and you'll notice that there is a little clip here, and that's what drives it. There's a little wire that hooks around the stud. If I remove that, you'll see it better. And just notice the orientation. It's on the top side of that, not the bottom. It's easy enough to put all of this stuff around. Okay, and now, again, we're doing this because we want to show you how to lubricate all of this. There's a bearing here. That's why I pulled that collar off. And I'm just going to use oil on that bearing. I'm going to use Real X, which is an aftermarket oil. There's a couple of screws here underneath here holding that case on. So if you just took these 3 off and then you were trying to pull it out, you never would get it off because of that little screw. So remember that as you go to reinstall. First thing up then is there's a little screw holding on the bump guard. We're going to take that off. I'm going to lay these on the table because they're not going to be around too long, but also I want to make sure as I do this that I remember to check to make sure that all of the screws are the same size, because a lot of times manufacturers will put a different size screw in the case somewhere. And it's not just for spinning reels. It happens on the last one I did, the C-line lever drag reel from Daiwa. They had small screws in different places on the posts. Okay, so one of the things I'm noticing as I'm doing this is the screws are sticking to my magnetic screwdriver, which means that these are steel screws, not stainless steel screws. And that's usually a sign of economy. A manufacturer will save a couple of pennies by using a steel screw over a stainless steel screw, and that keeps the cost of the reel down. 1, 2, 3, 4 screws out, bump guard off. We should be able to just remove this now by pulling the side plate out. Just like that. And interestingly enough, for a new reel, that's pretty dry. So it didn't hurt me to do this anyway. Okay, well, we're going to move this assembly down to the bottom. I'm not sure if we can pull that we can pull the main gear out without taking that off, so we don't need to in this case, just for general lubrication. If you needed to remove the axle shaft, there's a single screw on the crosswind block here. You take that screw out and you can pull up and pull off the axle. I'm going to go back and use some reel grease now. Make sure that the pinion gear gets greased. I'm going to make sure that I get grease onto the back of the crosswind block. So this probably dried out because it's probably been sitting in a warehouse for a while. So we'll just grease it up good. I'm going to check the teeth, even though I know it's a new reel and hasn't been used. There is some grease on the back of this. We're going to go ahead and just add a little more. Make sure all the teeth are uniform. Sometimes these reels come back to a distributor, sit in a warehouse for a while. Sometimes they come back because something went wrong, like it was a demonstrator unit or something, and you want to check for those. There's a plastic bushing inside the case. Go ahead and put this back in now. I'll make sure that you mesh it with the crosswind block as well as the pinion gear. Nothing needed to do on this side. You can simply take this case now and just reinstall, which is why I left those screws just kind of sitting on the desk there. Just want to line it up, and then you need to remember that you had the 3 long screws went here and the short screw went underneath the rotor. So overall, this design has been around an awful long time. It doesn't have an instant anti-reverse. It has that sawtooth anti-reverse dog that we showed you. It's friction driven. It's got an eccentric connection there with that little wire loop on it that when you stop is going to pull that one out. And when it pulls that one out, that tooth at the end of the dog is going to engage into the saw teeth, and that's how this thing's going to work. Alright, so we just took this, and we're going to just install that over the top, and we want to make sure that we get that little wire back onto the stud, and that's essentially how you tune this up. A drop of oil onto the anti-reverse dog. Again, this is new, but if you've been using yours a while, put a drop of oil there to keep that running fine. You can go ahead and put the rotor back on. There's a key here that runs, so we need to make sure that the key gets on proper. It's rectangular. And remember, our nut had that kind of a bevel edge on it going down, so let's make sure we do that. And remember, as we did this, that this is reverse threaded, so you have to turn counterclockwise to tighten your nut, where intuitively you would want to do that by tightening it clockwise. Tighten that down. Again, it's a 10mm nut. It's got a nice spin to it, nice action. And then we have a tie-down screw. And Shakespeare actually made it easy for me since these are metal. I can actually grip these. I have trouble with small parts, but a magnetic tip screwdriver with a steel screw is my recipe for happiness. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at what we got here. We've got the handle. Let's go put that back in. Before I do that, I'm going to put the bump guard on. It just kind of sits like that. Little screw for the bump guard. I believe that's also iron, so or steel. The bump guard is there so that the case doesn't shatter if you bump it against the pier wall or a piece of a boat or the like. The handle can go on either side. If you wanted to crank it with your right hand, you just simply put it in from this side. If you want to crank it from your left hand, which it seems the majority of folks do, put it in on the other side. Grab that handle screw now and insert that so that we can tighten that up. For a crank, there you go, very nice, smooth. And we got our click ratchet. That tells us that the drag is working and that it's being spooled out when it's clicking. Speaking of those drags, we're going to come over here now and take a look at the drags. I would expect to see either Teflon or felt in here. Let's take a look. There's a little clip here that rides in the grooves of the spool. So pull that out. And we have felt washers in here, which is kind of what I expected. There's a ton of them. That's great. Felt washers get oil to keep them flexible so that they don't dry out. So we're going to use a couple of drops of fishing reel oil on that washer. We have 2 round washers and 1 eared washer. So the round washer, this is called a keyed washer, goes next. Second felt washer goes in. These are dry, so these have been sitting in a warehouse for a while. The middle washer is always the eared washer. It's the odd one. Last of the felt washers. Give it a good drink of oil. Up top with the metal one. We'll close that up with the clip now. And that clip you want to make sure rides in the grooves again as you're going to set them in. Alright, easy enough. We only have one more thing to oil for the maintenance and we'll be done. But let's put this on first. I said 1, there's probably 2. 1, you have a handle. You can put a drop of oil into the handle. Then you want to put one around the line roller, even though it doesn't have a ball bearing, and you want to put a little bit of oil into the seams of your bail. That's it. So this is the Cirrus. It's a Shakespeare reel. Again, the sub-brand has been around forever, and it's been a reliable, dependable, inexpensive or value-priced reel that is great for fresh water, certainly ponds, fishing off docks, the rivers. 30 size reel. It's got a lot of line on it. This can take 190 yards of 4-pound or 140 of 6. That's a lot of line for fresh water, and it's a nice smooth operator. Just a single ball bearing, as we saw. Old school anti-reverse, but doesn't have to be instant anti-reverse in all reels. And this one is ready to go fishing. So even though it was new, we found out that it was dry and could stand some lubrication. And I hope this video showed you a little bit about the reel. And if you're interested, now you know you can go out and get one and go do some fishing with a relatively nice reel. So as I do always, this is the pandemic. Thank you to all of the first responders that are out there. If you're out there on the first lines helping us stay safe and nursing us back to health, I want you to know it's really appreciated. For those of you that like this video and would like to see more, please subscribe. If you have any comments, I try to respond to all of them. So with that, I'm going to wish you a great day. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.